Tonight, brand new video shows the real horror of this crisis at the southwest border, with nearly 17,000 children now in the custody of the U.S. government. Good evening, everyone. I'm Trish Regan, in tonight for my good friend Buck Sexton. And you know what? I want you to see this. I want you to see this video. We need to warn you that it's pretty disturbing. It's disturbing video, but you know what? It's the kind of video that every single adult, including Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, ought to be watching. This moment, in my view, should be frozen in time and played again and again, because this is what empty promises from Joe Biden and the left about amnesty have actually yielded us. Take a look here. This video comes to us tonight from the Customs and Border Patrol. You see two small children. We've learned that those are two little girls there, and they're being dropped like rag dolls right over the border, ages 3 and 5. 3 and 5 years old, just left to then wander on their own. Here's the second child getting dropped. And watch this, because these are the smugglers that you see on the other side. And the smugglers race off. And the Border Patrol catches them there as they race off. I mean, unbelievable. I'm happy to report the little girls are safe. They're in U.S. custody. But you see, this kind of thing is exactly what the Biden administration has actually created. By continually promising that this administration would offer a path to citizenship, they've effectively encouraged people to migrate here and to take on enormous, enormous risks. You know, words have consequences. Listen to what, for example, this migrant told ABC News because of some of the words he's been hearing from Joe Biden and company.
Would you have tried to do this when Donald Trump was president?
Definitely not. Definitely. We had the chance, you know, the same violence that is going on today was there last year. We used to watch the news, and I definitely won't do this.
So did you come here because Joe Biden was elected president?
Basically.
Yeah, I mean, because the Biden administration is saying, look, we'll find a way for you here in the promised land. Meanwhile, they've also said they're not going to turn away any children. So now we have more than 16,000, as I said tonight, approaching 17,000 unoccupied minors being housed by our federal government. Let's take a look at these pictures. I want to show you some of these overcrowded border facilities in Donna, Texas. These people are crammed in. Look at that, in glass cells. They're lying shoulder to shoulder with nothing to cover them but that metallic-like blanket. They're not being tested for COVID, by the way, despite the CDC director saying she's scared. She's warning of impending doom, despite states across the country demanding COVID vaccine passports. We're going to talk about that later. There are no tests here for any of these people that are being jammed into these facilities unless they show symptoms. And somehow Joe Biden thinks he can ignore this crisis, not even call it a crisis, or perhaps maybe he's got a new idea. Maybe just blame it on Kamala, right? He's making her in charge of the border now. Maybe not the best idea, because days before the vice president was assigned to the task, she was asked by reporters if she had any intention of traveling there. And this is her response.
Plans to visit the border?
Not today.
But I have before, and I'm sure I will again.
She laughs. She laughs because somehow this is funny stuff. You know, I recall a time when our lawmakers were speaking quite differently about our border just a couple of years ago, right? When the numbers were far lower, by the way, and the conditions much better. And yet listen to AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, equating those border facilities with concentration camps.
The United States is running concentration camps on our southern border, and that is exactly what they are.
Okay, what they are. You know what? That is the height of irresponsibility right there. When AOC says that, you know what? She's insulting every single Jewish person. She's insulting every single person that fought in World War II or lost a loved one in World War II. You know, keep in mind the migrants are at least willingly coming to this country, unlike the Jews who were rounded up and slaughtered. I mean, unbelievable, unbelievable. Meanwhile, of course, everything is President Trump's fault, right?
The idea that I'm going to say, which I would never do, if an unaccompanied child ends up at the border, we're just going to let him starve to death and stay on the other side. No previous administration did that either, except Trump. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it.
It is taking time, and it is difficult because the entire system was dismantled by the prior administration. There was a system in place in both Republican and Democratic administrations that was torn down during the Trump administration, and that is why the challenge is more acute than it ever has been before.
Nice try. Nice little political pivot there from Joe Biden, our president, and his Homeland Security chief. No. You know what? This massive uptick in border crossings, you know what this is about? This is about the change in policy. He said, effectively come one, come all. We're not turning anyone away. We're not going to have you stay in Mexico anymore. The massive uptick in border crossings is real, even though I know the media wants to try and make excuses for that too, right? Just a week ago, the Washington Post tried to argue that the 28% increase was just a seasonal thing. Consider this. According to the CBP, Border Patrol agents have had 100,441 encounters with migrants in the month of February, up from 78,442 in January. We don't even have the numbers yet for March, but I want you to keep in mind that border arrests in April of last year, when President Trump was in office, were 16,182. Here's why. President Biden has reversed the Trump administration's immigration policies, including the Remain in Mexico program. And policies have consequences, as we can see from that video tonight of children being thrown over the border, as we can see from the cramped quarters in Donna, Texas, and as we can see from the price tag associated with housing all of these people. It's a big price tag. The Biden administration is spending $86 million of your money and my money and everybody else's money that pays taxes in this country on hotel rooms for migrants. $86 million to house them. So that's a lot of money. But here's the kicker. It's for only 1,200 people. So we're talking $72,000 per hotel bed. Come on. Where's this money coming from? You and me and everybody else out there, we all know something. It's the American taxpayer. And apparently that's just fine by Joe Biden and company, right? I mean, hey, they're all into spending. They're on a massive spending spree. I'm going to have more on that coming up. But here's the reality. We cannot afford it. We can't. We don't have this kind of money. But rather than hold the Biden administration accountable for the disaster at the border, this real crisis, the mainstream media, they just look the other way, for the most part anyway. After all, truth is whatever they want it to be. And they told us as much. They've actually said it. Here's the head anchor for NBC News saying, we don't need to hear both sides.
I think it's become clearer that fairness is overrated. Well, before you run off and tweet that headline, let me explain a bit. The idea that we should always give two sides equal weight and merit does not reflect the world we find ourselves in. That the sun sets in the west is a fact. Any contrary view does not deserve our time or attention.
I remember when they used to say that, when they'd say, no, the world is flat. You see, apparently, according to the media, fairness is overrated. Sorry, Lester. I've worked as a network news correspondent, including, by the way, for your show. And I've been a journalist for 20 years. Fairness is all we've got as journalists. It is our duty to understand all sides. And when I sit down to watch a straight news program, I'm expecting some straight news. There is a viewer, which means we need fairness. You need both sides. You must present both sides. I know you don't. At least you come clean about it, right? The irony, of course, is that this anchor said this while accepting a prestigious journalism award. The bottom line tonight is this: human beings are being put unnecessarily in harm's way thanks to Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and company. American taxpayers are getting stuck with the bill, and the administration has no plan to deal with any of this. Any of this. It is a crisis, though they won't say so, and the media won't hold them accountable for anything. You know what? We all lose in that situation. So good to have you all here tonight. We got a whole lot to talk about, including all this spending, which is out of control. Meanwhile, we've got word that the public school teachers union in San Diego, that used to refuse to teach kids in person at their own schools for fear of COVID, well, guess what? Now they're going out and teaching in the migrant centers where there are no COVID tests. Somehow that's okay. I mean, let me get this straight. American school teachers are refusing to teach American children in person for fear of COVID, but are perfectly fine teaching migrant children who haven't been tested in person. We're on it. Don't go anywhere.
The American Jobs Plan will lead to a transformational progress in our effort to tackle climate change with American jobs and American ingenuity. We have to move now, because I'm convinced that if we act now, in 50 years, people are going to look back and say, this was the moment that America won the future.
You see, that was Joe Biden promising to spend your tax dollars. Welcome back, everyone. I am Trish Regan, and for my good friend, Buck Sexton tonight, and I'm calling this the Great American Tax Hike. You know, he doesn't want you to know about it. He's hiding it all as an infrastructure bill that is designed to lower our carbon footprint and, you know, renovate our bridges and tunnels and all these things that we need to do, but it's going to cost you a lot of money. And we're talking a lot of money, $2.3 trillion. Now, sometimes it's kind of hard to get your head around these numbers, right? I mean, I get it, because we just had 1.9 trillion in stimulus. He's doing 2.3 if he's lucky right now, and he wants a few more trillion for childcare and healthcare in the coming months. We don't have the money. So you know what this means? This means it's got to come out of someone's pocket. Every single American that pays taxes is going to pay more. And every single American, if you ask me, is going to wind up paying the price sooner or later, because you know what? We will have inflation. You will see, and we already are seeing, higher food costs, higher energy costs, higher housing costs. All of this acts as a drag on our economy, and we have none other than Joe Biden to thank. He's out there channeling FDR, thinking that this is some kind of new deal for America. I'll tell you this, it's a raw deal for America. And by the way, while we're at it, FDR's was too. If you look at the unemployment rate, and I know my next guest has a lot to say about this, during the Great Depression, during the 1930s, after FDR spent 3 times the size of our federal budget, guess what? It still averaged 18%. We did not get our economy out of depression until World War II. I don't know about you, but I don't want another world war to get us out of this mess that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are about to get us into. Joining me right now, one of my very good friends, somebody who actually advised President Trump on the tax cuts and the tax policy that we saw that was so beneficial to the economy over the last 4 years, none other than economist Stephen Moore from FreedomWorks. Good to see you, Steve.
Hi, Trish. Great to be with you.
This is a little crazy. I mean, to me, these numbers are so massive, and I think people have a hard time sort of understanding, like, what is that anyway? $2.3 trillion on the heels of the $2 trillion, and, you know, before the other couple trillion he wants to put in there. We're talking a lot of money, aren't we?
You know, I was struck by that clip that you showed of Joe Biden saying, you know, 15 years from now, our children will be praising us for what we've done. No, it's just the opposite, Mr. President. They're going to be horrified by what we've done. No great country passes trillions and trillions of dollars of spending so we can spend money now, and then passes their bills on to their children and grandchildren, right? I mean, Trish, this is child abuse, it's fiscal child abuse that we're engaged in right now. They will pay. You and I aren't going to pay for the bills for this. Our children and our grandchildren and grandchildren's children will. So let's not pretend that somehow our future generations are going to praise us for this. You know, the total amount of money now, Trish, you mentioned, first we had the $1 trillion already in the pipeline, you know, that from when Trump left office. Then they had a $1.9 trillion up top of that, which was completely unnecessary because we already had the $1 trillion. Now we're talking about $2 trillion for this bill. And you are right, Trish, they've got another $2 trillion bill going. So let me do the math, $6 to $7 trillion. I mean, did you ever think you'd see the day that where is the money going to come from? Are they going to massively raise taxes? Yeah, but even the massive tax increase is not going to cover even half of the cost of this.
It's not sustainable. That's my concern. You mentioned future generations getting hit with all this. I like that fiscal child abuse. It certainly is, Steve, a well put expression to define what we're dealing with. But I look at these guys. I don't think they get it. I think they're like, oh, it's sort of like pretend money. We can get it from companies. Oh, just take it from companies. Just take it from wealthy individuals. That'll work. But it doesn't, does it?
No, it's true. But look, there's a massive increase in quote taxes on the rich, but they increased the corporate tax rate. So we were proud under Trump. We brought that corporate rate down to from the highest in the world to one of the lower rates in the world. And now Biden, and by the way, we created all sorts of jobs as a result of that. We had 7 million surplus jobs. And now they want to raise that rate back way above the national average. Well, Trish, you've been in this game a long time. You know what that means is that money, those factories, those jobs are going to shift out of the United States. They're going to go to China. But the big winner here, of course, is China. China's loving what we're doing. They're laughing behind our back. We're disabling our economy in ways that will make China the superpower. But look, anybody who thinks that you're going to pay for $7 trillion of spending by taxing the top 1%, come on. Everyone knows that. By the way, they're already. Yeah. Go ahead.
Go ahead. They're already what?
Oh, I was just going to say this. Have you seen this new thing? They want to put these devices on your car so they can monitor how many miles you travel, so they can tax you per mile. Now, Trish, it's not just the top 1% who drive cars, right? I mean,
no, look, it will affect everyone, even though Joe Biden wants you to think otherwise. We have a clip of him on ABC News with George Stephanopoulos where it's clear to me, Steve, he doesn't even understand his own tax policy. Here we go.
Anybody making more than $400,000 will see a small to a significant tax increase. If you make less than $400,000, you won't see one single penny in additional federal tax.
Oh, except that's not right, Steve. It turns out Jen Psaki, his PR person, had to set the record straight the next day and explain that actually that was $400,000 per family. It's as though Joe forgets. The president forgets that there are often two earners in a family. Now, look, one person will be earning 200, the other 200, and you're going to get hit with this tax. But I do want to, and it may sound like a lot of money to some people, but it's not just that group, which he doesn't seem to understand anyway. It's the trickle-down effect of everybody else. Businesses moving offshore, businesses closing maybe because between, everything that they've hit them with, they don't really have the finances to manage this, causing our economy to restrict itself and constrict itself. Think about the Biden-Obama years, right? Remember that $800 billion stimulus? It kind of feels quaint, Steve. $800 billion. We're talking about $6 trillion now, but $800 billion was put into this economy, and as well as I, we got nothing for it, did we?
Well, do you remember Solyndra? Remember that one, Trish?
Oh yeah.
Solyndra. Those who may not have heard of that before, that was their grand prize winner for all their solar subsidies. I think we gave them, $500 to $750 million, and it was supposed to be, this exemplar of a great company, energy of the future. It never produced a single kilowatt of electricity. The people who got the money ran off to, Lord knows where they are, and the taxpayers got stuck paying the bill. This bill that Biden has introduced, this is Solyndra times 1,000. I mean, we're going to have so many examples of these boondoggles. Why can't we just let the free market work in energy? I'm not against solar energy. They're saying how efficient it is. Okay, what do they need? Billions and billions of dollars of subsidy if it's so efficient. Let's use all of the above. Let's use our nuclear, our natural gas, our oil, our coal, our wind, our solar, our hydro. Use it all. This idea that we're going to move from 80% of our energy coming from fossil fuels to zero. I mean, if you want to really destroy an economy, you do that.
There you go, talking some sense again. Steve Moore, it's really good to see you. I want to encourage everybody, if they're not signed up for your email, the Committee to Unleash Prosperity, which Steve is very much a part of, he sends out an email every day. I love that email, Steve. Thank you for that. And it's free, by the way, so you can sign up at Committee to Unleash Prosperity. You can also check out Steve's show that is produced by FreedomWorks. It's wonderful to see you again, my friend. Okay, coming up, taxes. we were talking about taxes on cars, right? And possible mileage, talking about Big Brother. Well, now they actually want to have a COVID-19 vaccine passport. I mean, this really is Big Brother on steroids. Corey Lewandowski is going to be joining us on that next. Welcome back, everyone. I am Trish Regan, in for my good friend Buck Sexton tonight. And this evening, we know that there are nearly 100 million Americans that have already gotten their first COVID-19 vaccine shot, and they're waiting for another. Well, some states want to make really, really sure people have gotten that COVID-19 vaccine shot. So sure that they want COVID-19 passports, vaccination passports to ensure, if you're going to go to the grocery store, if you're going to go to the movie theater, you got to show your passport showing that you've gotten the vaccine. This strikes me as once again being all about control. They want to control where you go, who you see, how much money you make. They are using coronavirus to enforce all this control. And I find it pretty disturbing. Oh, well, by the way, simultaneously not bothering to ask for ID when people go to vote. Go figure. I mean, if you're going to ask for ID just to walk into the grocery store, people are saying, oh, well, that's discriminatory. You can't ask for ID at the voting booth, but apparently you can ask at the movie theater. I don't get it. I guarantee you somebody else doesn't get it either. None other than my next guest, Corey Lewandowski, who's a senior advisor to the Trump campaign 2020. It's good to see you.
Trish, it's great to be here. I would almost think we're living in an alternate universe. We're now going to require people to have what they call a COVID passport to go not only into private businesses, but to potentially cross state lines. There is nothing more un-American, more against our individual liberties and freedoms than having people walk around with a government-issued passport or documentation, as we call it, to go to certain businesses and certain states. Look, I don't understand this. I've had COVID. I don't wish it on anybody. But this notion that you have to go and get vaccinated in order to go and patronize a private business or to cross a state line is so antithetical to everything our forefathers have fought for. The American people should be up in arms almost literally about this.
Yeah, again, it goes back, though, to, I think, a sense of control. I look at everything that the left is doing. And by the way, they're using coronavirus. I said it a while back, got in a lot of trouble, as you know, Corey, but I said they were using it for political purposes. Now I look at what they're doing and I'm like, whoa, they're using it to have massive stimulus. Let's be very clear. I mean, 2.3 trillion in the infrastructure thing, and then they want another couple trillion in childcare and healthcare. This is on the heels of the 1.9 trillion. And this is now, Corey, by the way, Joe Biden says we're at war with coronavirus. I mean, I hate to break it to him, but it's kind of like the war's ending, right? So why are you ramping up spending? Why are you ramping up control now, just as we actually are seeing a light at the end of the tunnel?
Well, the reason, Tricia, is very simple. Government first told us that they were the problem. And what they did, was amazing to me, is they took away our individual liberties under this coronavirus, pandemic. They said you can't assemble, you can't have free speech, you can't worship. We're going to close your churches. We're going to dictate which businesses can and can't stay open. And all the same time, they said, but don't worry, we're going to provide the solution for you. And they want to take over our lives. And I can't believe how many Americans simply gave up those rights so quickly. I think almost every governor in America should be held accountable for dictating winners and losers in this world of your business is or is not essential. There are very few governors in this country who stood fast, read the Constitution, and said, I don't have the authority to do that. But what scares me the most, Trish, is that, Rand Paul talked about this the other day when Fauci testified in front of his committee. It is now the theater of COVID. Fauci's got the inoculation, but he's walking around with 2 masks on. It's a total fallacy. It's a scam. Look, Dr. Fauci, you're telling us that if you go get this inoculation, the efficacy rate is high and you're going to be safe. But he still doesn't want to have us interact with anybody. Fauci says he doesn't want to see his kids for Easter. Well, that's great, because I don't want to see his kids either. But I want to see my kids. I want to see my family. I want to go see my father-in-law, who's so afraid that someone might catch COVID because he's in that age that he wants to, lock himself in his home for the next 3 years because the government's telling him he should. It's scary that the government continues to tell us what we can and can't do. Wear a double mask. Well, why not just make it a triple mask? Why not make it a quadruple mask? Fauci is so full of crap, this guy should be wearing a mask on his butt.
Okay. Wow. Corey, you mentioned governors. Governor DeSantis, I got to say, I got to hand it to the guy. You contrast what happened in Florida, what happened in California, and that is a perfect example, if you ask me, of smart policy versus dumb policy. And he's also, by the way, standing up to the darn vaccine passports. Your thoughts?
Ron DeSantis has done an amazing job as the governor of Florida. He's been leading by example. His executive order saying that we're not going to have these COVID passports is leading the country right now. Look at the state that he is overseeing and the economic boost that they continue to get. More people are moving to Florida every single day from places like New York and California because they're being taxed to death. And what we see is when you have economic freedom and you've got lower taxes and less regulation and great sunshine, people want to go there because their lives are better. Look, Trish, I grew up in the Northeast like you, and I'm really partial to it. But the more time I've spent in Florida, I said, somebody must know something I don't. And I go down there and say, maybe I don't have to shovel anymore. There's no income tax. There's a low tax base. The climate's fantastic. They welcome people to come and do businesses down there. They know how to run an election with a permanent absentee voting system in place, which verifies that you can only vote once. The governor of the state of Florida is doing a phenomenal job, and others should be paying attention to what he's doing down there.
Let me ask you what your thoughts are as we move forward now. We look at the social media climate that we are now living in. Lara Trump found out Facebook doesn't want to hear from her father-in-law, even if she's just sitting down herself to talk with him. We have an effort underway to really squash anything associated with Donald Trump. But I have a feeling that all of the, and you know this well, Corey, all of the sort of emotion and concerns that he stirred up, that's very real. There are 74 million people that voted for him because they feel like they're getting the raw end of the deal. And now, with all this spending and the coronavirus insanity continuing, I suspect they're going to continue to feel like they're getting a raw end of this deal. So what happens? He set up his own office. Do you think he runs again? Do you think somebody like DeSantis steps into those shoes?
Well, I think Donald Trump's message of America first, not America alone, but America first, still resonates with a lot of people in this country. We shouldn't have to apologize for being the greatest country in the world. We shouldn't have to apologize for standing up for the men and women who serve in our law enforcement communities or our men and women who serve in the armed services. We shouldn't have to apologize for putting our hands over our hearts and standing for the flag and kneeling for God. But, our country is moving in a socialist agenda and in a socialist way. And that socialism has never worked in any civilized society in the world. It's not going to work here. We're a right of center nation. And I think those 75 million people who supported Donald Trump see that standing up for our values is important. Making sure that people understand they can't walk all over us is important. And more than that, I remember that Barack Obama lost 63 seats in the midterm election of his first term. I see the left has become so far and so aggressive that the Republicans are going to take back the House of Representatives. The Republicans are going to take back the U.S. Senate. And Donald Trump is going to play a key role in those resurgence because he is the leader of the Republican Party. And once we take back the House and the Senate, I think you're going to see a candidate in Donald Trump come forward and say, my policies work for this country. We had 4 years of economic prosperity. Let's go take another run at this.
Wow. That would really be historic. That'll be something to see. Anyway, it's so good to talk to you. And there might be some nostalgia there after people deal with what we're going to be dealing with over the next 4 years. Corey Lewandowski, thank you, my friend. So good to have you here.
Thank you, Trish.
Okay, coming up next, everyone, as teachers' unions around the nation fight against going back to teach in person. Guess what's happening in San Diego? The teachers there are actually offering to go and teach migrant children in person, but refusing to do so for the American kids? What's this about? We're on it after this. Hello, welcome back. I'm Trish Regan in tonight for my good friend Buck Sexton. And you're not going to believe the story that's coming to us out of San Diego right now. I want to get to it. In San Diego, teachers are being offered the option of teaching migrant children in person as opposed to the American students that they would be teaching online. Now, don't forget, public school teachers have been all upset. You know, there was potential that they could get COVID and spread COVID or get it from the kids. And so many teachers unions across the country have, laid down the line and said, we're not going into school. San Diego is one of these schools. In fact, they have hybrid teaching there, or basically they're going to go back to hybrid. I guess they're going to go back in person on April 12th. But right now it's online, unless, of course, you want to go teach migrant children in person at the convention center, which somehow they want to do, but they don't want to go and teach the American kids. Can you make sense of this? Joining us right now to try is none other than the New York Post columnist, Carol Markowitz. Carol, welcome. Good to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, I mean, I don't get it, right? Like, they don't want to go to school to teach in person American kids, but they'll go to the migrant centers?
Right.
Aren't you just as worried about COVID at the migrant centers?
Right. There's a lot that has made no sense about the school closures, and this is just the latest example of that. It's either safe or it's not safe to go teach children. It doesn't really matter which children, right? And, we've seen this on different levels. Like in New York, instead of having open schools, we've had child care centers open that are obviously not unionized teachers, therefore they're not at risk, therefore they can go teach, not teach, but sit with the kids while they do their remote learning. So we've seen examples like this over and over again. And what's really crazy to me is that it continues to only be the conservative media that really picks it up and says, wait, this makes no sense. If the mainstream media did a better job, we would have kids back in schools. But, that's a lot to ask for.
Well, look, I look at it and I feel so bad for these kids in communities where you don't have enough people speaking up and saying, wait a second, this isn't right. I mean, what about the poor kid in Baltimore or the poor kid in Chicago? These inner city kids that are frankly being shortchanged in the education system as it is. And now these are the communities that are going to be the last, right, to go back to school because of the power of the unions. And somehow the politicians are powerless in all this. I mean, they should tell the teachers unions to take a hike, but they don't dare. I'll tell you this, even President Obama came down on the teachers unions, but it's something that Joe Biden is not willing to do. I want to share this with you. This is Jen Psaki basically making excuses. Jen Psaki from the White House. Here we go.
Does the White House think that this sends the right message to these 130,000 kids in San Diego and their parents who've been stuck at home for the last year?
Well, I'm just saying that context is important, and these kids are going back to school for hybrid learning. We, of course, want that to be 5 days a week, and we're confident we'll get there early next month. And I believe they're also on spring break right now. So these teachers would be, I'm not sure if it's volunteer or paid, you'd have to ask the local school district while the kids are on spring break, which I think the context is pretty important.
Okay, so I'm going to stop it there and just say, if you're out teaching in the migrant community in person, and the whole idea has been to be so careful on COVID, and yet they haven't had any COVID tests at these migrant centers. I don't know. I mean, it just seems like a little bit contradictory, right? If you're so concerned about health.
Yeah, and I want
now you're going back into the regular school system.
Right. So I want the follow-up questions for Jen Psaki. The San Diego kids are going to school next month full-time. Next month is May. That's the traditional end of the school year. What are you doing? It's not enough to say they'll get to go to school for 3 days before the school year ends. That's the thing. Again, I'm glad she's getting some questions on it, but what if she got a follow-up question that said, wait, your May plan makes no sense? And, I'd like to see that.
Well, some people are fighting back. I want to go to one of the local politicians in San Diego who's calling out this insanity.
Mm-hmm. We have 130,000 students in San Diego Unified School District that are not allowed for in-person training right now. And we've got, these poor migrant kids that came across the border, these girls without parents. And they're I'm not begrudging the fact that they should not have the education, but our kids should have that opportunity as well. And unfortunately, through Gavin Newsom's policies, they've been locked out of the classrooms.
Yeah, it's sad because the left talks so much, Carol, about helping kids and giving everybody a real chance. To me, in a real meritocracy, everybody starts out with some basics, right? And part of that should be education. But you think about the last year and what our children, what an entire generation has lost. But by the way, even when they go back to school, they're going to keep on losing out because we've got so much wokeism in schools across the country that I don't even know how you can learn, for goodness sakes. I know this is a passion of yours. You just joined a new board that's designed to fight back against this. And I'll just ask you, how can you? I mean, there was a recent story that came out by a former New York Times reporter that talked about how parents at a private school were like meeting in secret to talk about how crazy the wokeism was, but they were afraid to say anything to the actual teachers. And by the way, that was private school.
Yeah, well, a lot of parents are afraid. They're afraid to speak up. They're afraid to be ostracized. They're afraid to be called a racist because that shuts down the conversation, and that's the end of that. So what this group, Parents Defending Education, is doing is really stepping in on behalf of those parents who are afraid to have their lives ruined over speaking out. This group plans to go after these school boards and these school districts that are pushing this wokeism. They're planning to find out how much money they're spending to get these, anti-racist speakers to come in. One school district spent $10,000 on a 45-minute lecture. So that's one part of it. The other part of it is they're planning to sue school districts and school boards for racist behavior, for doing things that are illegal and that we've sort of forgotten. Compelled speech is not allowed, and yet happens all the time in our public schools. So they're going to be doing a lot of really
like reverse kind of.
Yeah.
No,
So
it's kind of reverse racism. I look at like what they're doing in Oakland right now. The city is giving out money, determining, I mean, it comes from private sources, but it's the city that's determining who's going to get it. And you have to be low income, but you can't be white. You can be an undocumented immigrant, but you have to be of the indigenous population. I mean, they have all these crazy stipulations. And I'm like, wait a second. This is the government, the city of Oakland, effectively invoking pretty unfair practices. And it's happening in schools, it's happening in cities, and somebody's got to stand up. I'm glad that you're part of that group that is standing up. Carol, it is so good to see you. Thank you for coming on the program tonight.
Thank you, Trish.
You bet. All right, everyone. Jill Biden, forgive me, Dr. Jill Biden has completely outdone herself. We've got the tape. Wait until you see this video. I got to show you this video because I got a really good laugh from it. When it crossed my Twitter feed, at Trish_Regan, by the way, if you're on Twitter, I thought, wait a second, like, what is she trying to say? It's very clear that Dr. Jill Biden didn't get her doctorate in the Spanish language. I want you to see this. Oh, and check out the audience.
So say it with me. Si se puede. The future is ours. Thank you.
First of all, she's very animated, right? For all of like 10 people in the background, that was a lot of excitement. So when you start tight on her, I'm thinking, oh, she's got a huge crowd, but it was just, a few reporters or who knows. And the whole si se puede, that's what she was trying to say. I mean, I just didn't get that. And I speak Spanish. I had no idea, absolutely no idea what she was saying. Can we run it again? Because it's just funny.
So say it with me. Si se puede. The future is ours. Thank you.
I love that. All right. Speaking of funny stories, actually not so funny. Everybody's, saying, oh, poor Major, the dog, right? One of the two German shepherds that Joe and Jill Biden have. He had a little accident in the White House. I'll forgive him that. You know what I'm not going to forgive, though? I forgive the dog. I don't forgive the dog owners because Major has now bitten someone twice. I have a dog. Part of the responsibility as a dog owner is you actually make sure that your dog doesn't bite people. And I don't care, it's a new environment, there's new people around. That is the responsibility of the owner to make sure that their dog doesn't bite, right? It's just kind of like what you do. Anyway, apparently not for the Bidens. We're out of time here. I really want to ask you to make sure that you go to trishintel.com. Do me this favor, sign up for my podcast. I'm there every single day, and I look forward to talking with you some more. So trishintel.com. I'm so glad to be here for my friend Buck Sexton. I haven't really filled in on TV too much, but Buck is a special deal. He's a good friend, and I know he's got a wonderful audience. So he'll be back with you hopefully tomorrow. The No Spin News with Bill O'Reilly is coming up next. Have a terrific night, everyone.